save you.
Star Trek was unique because it showed this optimistic version of the future. Across its nearly 1,000 episodes, the franchise has never shied away from banking on horror tropes to tell its stories. Believe it or not, the franchise has explored its own version of horror icons like zombies, mind-bending parasites, Jekyll and Hyde, Xenomorph-like aliens, and hell, they even had an episode featuring Jack the Ripper, like the real one. Then again, you know what? Some of the horror episodes of Star Trek have aged like milk, and we're not going to talk about those, but there are some that have aged like fine wine, and that's what we want to talk about today. That's why we bring to you the 12 scariest, most disturbing Star Trek episodes that could pass as horror classics. So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 6, Episode 5, Schisms. There is something extremely disturbing about not being able to trust your own memory, and that's pretty much the foundation of this episode. Crew members aboard the Enterprise begin to lose sleep as well as time, and react to regular and familiar objects like they've seen something from the beyond. So, basically, people don't even know what's happening to them, which only elevates the fear quotient in our minds. I mean, even if you're dealing with a horrendous monster, at least that's kind of familiar territory, but these psychological things can be very, very unsettling. Anyway, a few people, including Commander William Riker, realize they share similar experiences. With Counselor Deanna Troy's help, they try to piece things together inside the holodeck, and they come up with this dark room, strange sounds, and an operating table-like device. Next, Dr. Beverly Crusher examines the affected crew and finds signs of sedation, but more importantly, or more frighteningly, she notices slight physical changes, like a microscopic misalignment in Riker's arm bones, as if his arm had been cut off and then reattached. Riker, of course, remembers none of it, but it becomes more than evident that the crew members had been abducted and experimented upon. In fact, when they begin looking for the missing crew members, they end up finding one, but that poor soul doesn't live for very long as his blood had been turned into liquid polymer, and of course, the human body isn't capable of pumping that through its veins. It's finally revealed that aliens were abducting crew members and experimenting on them every night, all without the knowledge of the crew. They were able to do so through schisms or splits in subspace. In fact, the bodies of these aliens were formed of selenogen, a substance that could only exist in subspace. Some people argue that they looked more like fish monks, and monks aren't scary, but we think they were a terrible, unexplained force, especially because they didn't come in peace. They didn't care about the people they experimented on, only the knowledge they gained. Commander Riker's efforts to get rid of these aliens is what makes the episode more thrilling than horrifying, but still, it's a horrifying place to start.
Necessary, Mr. Kim, but thank you.
Star Trek Voyager, Season 2, Episode 23, The Thaw. This episode is about a system that was meant to create a utopia, but ends up feeding on fear instead. Here, the Voyager finds a place that went through a major ecological disaster some 19 years ago. In the aftermath, some survivors placed themselves in stasis, and when our crew checked the pods, they found that 2 of those people were already dead from heart attacks. The remaining 3 should have woken up long ago, but they were still trapped in their artificial sleep. Needless to say, something inside the system had gone off the rails. The Voyager crew isn't even able to wake these people up because their minds were connected to a central computer that linked all the pods. So the only way to save them was, well, to go in after them. B'Elanna Torres and Harry Kim volunteer for the task, and once connected, they find themselves inside a virtual world that looks like a dark circus. Here, everything smiles a little too much, as if it was run by Pennywise from It. But we finally meet the crown of this world, and it's revealed that this guy runs the place, controls the environment, and more importantly, feeds on fear. Once again, the Pennywise influence cannot be ignored. This system was meant to build a paradise based on the thoughts of its users, but instead, it latched onto their fears and grew from that. Over time, it gained the ability to kill, and that's how the utopian planet met its end. In other words, this clown is basically a super malevolent hologram that's also the manifestation of the worst fears of 5 people. And by worst fears, we mean the fear of death. He managed to convert their dream state into this torturous and violent environment. Additionally, the clown has extremely erratic behavior and terrible mood swings, so much so that the clown killed 3 of his victims by making them experience an illusion where they were being placed in a guillotine about to have their heads chopped off. Even then, he couldn't let them go because his existence was dependent on these aliens. This episode really messes with the viewer in many ways, but the Voyager crew, and Captain Janeway in particular, managed to outsmart the clown, thereby showing us how to kill something that's intangible in the first place. Star Trek Voyager, Season 4, Episode 7, Scientific Method. You know what's so special about Hans Gruber, the bad guy from Die Hard? Well, he's the kind of guy who doesn't scream at you, doesn't get angry, and remains polite and calm for as long as possible, but you just know that behind his shiny suit, he's hiding a monster. And Scientific Method is an episode about a similar kind of villain, the Srivani, who see sentient races like humans the same way humans see lab animals like rats and guinea pigs, useful, expendable, and necessary for finding treatments to the physical and psychological disorders that the Srivani people suffer from. In this episode, Janeway suffers from severe headaches, but the crew assumes it's due to pulsars nearby. In the beginning, there's nothing that requires anyone's urgent or immediate attention, but then things escalate. Chakotay ages decades and hours before losing his hair and going blind. Neelix develops spots across his body and starts to stink. The Doctor and Torres discover that their DNA has been altered by an external force, and even worse, there's alien writing embedded in their nucleotides, like some kind of barcode, which is a pretty disturbing thing to happen to these spacefarers. That alien writing basically means that someone has marked them at a genetic level. And before they can go any further, Torres suffers a seizure and goes into respiratory arrest, and the Doctor gets shut down. Meanwhile, 7 of 9 receives a coded message from the Doctor and meets him in the holodeck. He explains that an unseen entity has been tagging the crew and mutating them, and it can silence anyone who gets close to the truth. He upgrades 7's vision so that she can see beyond the normal spectrum, and that's when the illusion breaks. She walks through the ship and suddenly sees them. These cloaked aliens who were standing right next to the crew. They were watching, taking notes, and adjusting their devices, just like human scientists in their white lab coats and aprons while experimenting on animals. And if you recall Janeway's headache that started this all off, well, it was happening because the Srivani were testing and studying sleep deprivation through needles they placed right into her skull. It takes a lot of courage to finally get rid of these scientific aliens, but I think what makes this episode scary is the fact that the Srivani never really saw themselves as the bad guys. They thought it was okay to subject beings to painful and deadly medical research on the pretext of saving millions. This, of course, is very similar to what humans do, and Scientific Method, as an episode, was simply a mirror held up to humanity. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 5, Episode 24, Empok Nor. In Empok Nor, things go to shit in a very methodical manner, and by the time people understood what was happening, it was already too late. In fact, in the episode preceding this one, a recurring character named Michael Eddington was killed, which came as a shock to long-term fans. In this episode, Deep Space Nine needs parts, and the only place to get them is its abandoned twin, Empok Nor. So Chief Miles O'Brien takes a small team, including a couple of engineers, 2 security officers, and Nog for the salvage mission. And since Cardassians were known as one of the most fearsome and ruthless species who like to play with booby traps, the salvage team also had Garak because he knew how to disarm traps. Once they reach Empok Nor, things look better than they expected, at least for a while. Garak takes care of whatever traps he can find, and the team begins its salvage work. However, it wasn't long before the real problem presented itself in the form of a couple of Cardassian soldiers. These two come out of stasis and destroy the runabout, meaning everybody was now stranded. The whole situation soon exacerbates from a salvage mission to a hunt. And to make things worse, these soldiers weren't thinking straight because they were under the influence of a drug that increased their aggressive and xenophobic tendencies. Eventually, Garak touches this strange blue residue and goes after the soldiers and manages to kill one of them, but the thing is, he starts to enjoy it. Like, not the kills themselves, but how natural killing feels to him. And now, O'Brien had to face Garak, and he does so, but not using brute force. O'Brien uses Garak's own skills to defeat him until the drug wears off. Empok Nor remains one of the better episodes where you have a bad guy who wasn't really a bad guy in the beginning, and when push comes to shove, you gotta fight one of your own teammates as well. Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 3, Episode 26, Best of Both Worlds. Best of Both Worlds is a two-part episode spread across the Season 3 finale and the first episode of Season 4. It starts as a mystery, but then turns into an affair that risks the very future of Earth. In the first part, Season 3, Episode 26, the Enterprise answers a distress call from Juret 4 and finds nothing. There was no colony to be found, nor any survivors, or even a sign of a fight. Given these signs, or lack of signs rather, Starfleet assumes that the Borg could be behind this. And if you're still watching this video, I don't think I need to remind you who or what the Borg are. Admiral Hansen boards the Enterprise with Lieutenant Commander Shelby, who knows the Borg inside and out. At the same time, Riker is finally forced to take command of the USS Melbourne, despite refusing to do so twice in the past. We soon learn that another Federation ship has encountered a cube-shaped vessel before going silent. The Enterprise tracks it down and meets the Borg face to face, but instead of a fight, the Borg demand that Picard surrender himself. He refuses, of course, after which the Borg lock the ship in a tractor beam and slice into the hull. Because of Shelby's idea, the Enterprise manages to escape into a nebula, but the status quo changes as soon as the Borg adapt to the evolving situation and force the Enterprise out. Next thing we know, they've boarded the ship and taken Picard. Following this, the cube heads straight for Earth, while the Enterprise, now led by Riker, follows behind. After catching up, Shelby leads the rescue mission for Picard, and upon finding what's left of him, he reveals that Picard isn't Picard any longer. He's become Locutus of the Borg, and, in his own words, resistance is futile. The really horrific part about this whole thing is that the Borg wanted Picard so they could turn him into a voice, a bridge to humanity, a way to make their assimilation smoother. Through him, the Borg get some essential data, like his knowledge and memories, and even how he addresses Riker as number one. And the story only becomes wilder in Season 4, Episode 1, before things eventually settle down for the better. But yeah, Best of Both Worlds was a shocker because it took Picard, one of the greatest Star Trek captains, and turned him into an evil Borg facsimile. Chilling stuff.
Leave you.
Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 6, Episode 21, Frame of Mind. Okay, so in Frame of Mind, Star Trek really explored the horror genre and remained committed to it for as long as possible. Instead of evil holograms and aliens, the horror comes from problems of the mind. We follow Commander Riker, and you can tell from the very beginning that something's off about him, like he just isn't himself. He performs in a play where his character finds himself in an uncertain and unstable state in a mental institution, and while this may sound like a recreational activity, appearing in a play, there's much more to it than meets the eye. After rehearsal, and before an away mission to Tylonis 4, Riker starts to feel uneasy, but he performs the play again. At the end, he takes his bow, but when he stands upright, he's not on stage anymore. He's in a cell, and one that's oddly similar to the one from the play. An alien doctor comes to him and very calmly tells him the truth, or at least what he claims is the truth. According to him, the Enterprise itself isn't real, and Riker's life as a Starfleet officer is a fabrication that's nothing more than a coping mechanism that mental patients often use. Riker is then told that the asylum is where he belongs, but the weird part is that the episode doesn't do anything to prove that this alien doctor was at all wrong. Riker tries to fight back, but the only way he could do that was to stick with what he knows about himself and his life. Stuff like the crew, his ship, and more. But every time he thinks he's free, the illusion resets, so he moves from one version of reality to another, and each is very convincing. That repetition wears him down, and honestly, it gets to you as a viewer as well. You start to question what the truth is alongside Riker, but eventually, the truth comes to light when Riker finds himself on an operating table. It turns out that aliens had taken him and built this uber-complex and layered mental construct to study him and pull information about the Enterprise and its crew. What we like here is how focused this episode stays on the psychological horror tropes. Frame of Mind doesn't try to expand into a larger plot or include too many people in it. It stays with Riker and his experiences, and even after it ends, you aren't fully sure if the alien doctor was right or wrong. Star Trek, the original series, Season 2, Episode 14, Wolf in the Fold. You want some scary Star Trek? Well, we present to you Wolf in the Fold, which is actually about serial-killing women in a rather crimeless and peaceful world. In this episode, Captain Kirk, McCoy, and Scotty take shore leave on Argelius 2, a place known for peace and zero crime. Scotty meets a dancer named Kara and goes out with her, but then a scream cuts through the fog like a hot knife through butter. Kirk and McCoy rush in and find Kara dead, and Scotty standing there with a bloody knife in hand. However, Scotty doesn't have any memory or explanation about what happened and how exactly Kara died. Naturally, this puts the blame on Scotty, who's detained, and the investigation starts under Hengist, the head of security on Argelius. The prefect, Jarus, brings in his wife, Cybo, to perform an empathic ritual since the planet relies on emotional truth rather than force. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Karen Tracy beams down with a psycho tricorder to help. She interviews Scotty and ends up murdered as well. Again, the evidence all points to Scotty, and if you watch the episode, by this point, you'll start to wonder if he actually committed those murders, or if Scotty won't be going scot-free on this one because the evidence was so damning. Anyways, the ritual with Cybo leads us in a whole other direction. Everyone holds hands like a seance, and Cybo talks about a being with a hunger that never ends that's called Kessla, Baratus, and Red Jack. Then the fire dies, and she screams, but the lights come back on, and she's already dead. And of course, it's Scotty once again holding the murder weapon. The investigation then moves to the Enterprise, where good old Kirk figures out that the Red Jack that Cybo was talking about is actually Red Jack, aka Jack the Ripper, and his non-corporeal form has been jumping from host to host and feeding on fear. In addition to the confusion, this theory also explained the pattern of killings and the way Scotty was framed each time. But to make things worse, Jack the Ripper takes over the ship itself and starts pushing the entire crew into their deepest and darkest fears. It's a while before the matter is resolved, but who would have expected Star Trek to feature Jack the Ripper so prominently? And, like many other villains, Jack also fed on fear, which made him extremely difficult to outfight. Star Trek: The Original Series, Season 2, Episode 7, Cat's Paw. If you've ever read any Shakespearean tragedy, you know that the first scene's setting tells you what's in store for the rest of the scenes and the acts. Likewise, Cat's Paw's eerie setting tells us that something is seriously wrong with the place and that we can expect terrible things to happen. The Enterprise orbits Pyrus 7, which, by the way, was a planet that should have no life on it. None at all. Next, a landing party, including Scotty, Sulu, and crewman Jackson, goes in, but it goes totally silent, and the only response Kirk gets is a frantic call for a beam-up, followed by Jackson collapsing during one of his transmissions. His body hits the ground, and then his voice, or something using it, warns Kirk to leave or face certain death. Kirk beams down with Spock and McCoy, and almost immediately, the episode becomes a full-blown horror movie. They run into three witch-like beings who warn them to turn back, which of course they don't. Instead, they find a full medieval castle here on a planet that supposedly had zero life. So of course they head inside, but it only gets worse from there. A black cat with a diamond pendant leads them through the halls, but one thing leads to another, and they find themselves trapped in the dungeon. Next thing we know, they're standing in front of this robed person named Korob, and that black cat from earlier, it was now giving this Korob guy instructions. It's revealed that the cat was actually an ornithoid named Sylvia, and this species could change their form at will and control the minds of others. Sylvia holds a miniature version of the Enterprise over flames, and the real ship's temperatures spike. Meanwhile, Korob holds the Enterprise in a force field, and suddenly, Kirk loses all control. But the thing is, Sylvia wanted to kill Korob as well in order to become more powerful. We think this episode is exceedingly scary because the fear that Sylvia and her schemes exude, it actually works. This episode bends reality and traps you in scenarios where you can trust neither your surroundings nor your own mind. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, Season 1, Episode 9, All Those Who Wander. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds doesn't explore the horror genre as much as its predecessors, but that kind of changed with Season 1's 9th episode, All Those Who Wander, which goes all in with the horror tropes. Here, the Enterprise is on a routine delivery to Space Station K7 when Captain Christopher Pike gets a distress call from the crashed USS Peregrine on Vallejo Beta 5. Since they're the only ship nearby, Pike takes an away team to investigate while the Enterprise continues its mission. So this was a standard rescue setup. Nothing unusual here, but then they went inside the wreck, and the crew quickly figures out what must have gone wrong. You see, the Peregrine had taken in 3 refugees, and one of them had Gorn eggs within them. The eggs hatched from inside the host, Buckley in this case, and the resultant creature tears its host apart before starting to hunt. As you can see for yourself, this is very reminiscent of the Alien franchise, and much like the Xenomorphs, the Gorn also become capable of killing people not long after their birth. Anyways, La'an Noonien Singh knows exactly what they're dealing with, given her past with the Gorn, but even she doesn't have a definite solution for this situation. The crew tries to survive inside tight corridors while these hatchlings move through the ship like predators. They still manage to come up with a plan to lure the last hatchling into the shuttle bay and flash freeze it, and although it's risky, the plan works, with La'an and Hemmer serving as bait. In fact, they barely make it out while the creature tears through the space behind them. Unfortunately, Hemmer also becomes infected, and because there's no solution to his condition, he ends his own life. Needless to say, this one was a pure creature feature with terrifying aliens looking to hunt and impregnate just about anything that moved. Unlike the Xenos, the Gorn aren't really complex villains with a grand design, but they are brutally efficient and relentless. What that means is that you either stop them or you become part of their process. Star Trek Enterprise, Season 3, Episode 5, Impulse. If we're talking Halloween-friendly Star Trek Enterprise episodes, Impulse is going to be pretty near the top of that list. It's actually closer to the end of this video because this is just a list, not a ranking as such, but believe me when I say this one has everything from Vulcan zombies to a wrecked ship to flickering lights to a super spooky setting. In the episode, the Enterprise follows a distress signal to the Saleya, a Vulcan ship drifting in an asteroid field packed with Trellium-D, the same substance they need to survive the Delphic expanse. But then, as soon as Jonathan Archer and the away team board the Saleya, things get really shitty. The ship is found in pieces, and the crew isn't what they used to be. These Vulcans poison themselves while trying to coat their hull with Trellium-D. This stuff protects humans, but it messes with and wrecks the minds of Vulcans, so much so that their instincts turn extremely violent and they themselves become zombified. Like they don't speak, they don't think, and they don't stop. These zombified Vulcans attack from all sides, and Vulcans, who are usually all about control, logic, and discipline, leave no stone unturned now that their minds were unhinged. Impulse was a complete zombie horror episode, and it almost feels like something X-Files would do. Having said that, this was a beautifully made episode, and while we're still not totally sure about zombies in our sci-fi space show, Impulse, as an episode, works for us. Star Trek Voyager, Season 3, Episode 18, Darkling. In Darkling, the Doctor tries to expand his personality using holodeck data, but then his program glitches, and an evil version of him goes after Kes. Oh yeah, this is absolutely Jekyll and Hyde territory. And I mean, now that we mention it, the Star Trek writers actually got inspired by a lot of regular old-school movie monsters. Like, we get zombies and weird aliens that grow within you, but this next entry even has parasites that take people over. Now, to be fair, this concept itself isn't bad, and the Doctor experiencing this whole Jekyll and Hyde situation really has some potential. There are moments where the darker version of him feels pretty darn scary, especially when he uses medical knowledge as a weapon. He turns sickbay tools into harmful stuff, and this very efficiently makes him terrifying while not going too far over the top. He knows exactly how to hurt you, and he doesn't hesitate. The mystery angle doesn't help either. Kes's new partner gets pushed off a cliff by a hooded figure, and that's one of the biggest questions that the episode poses. But if you're watching closely, the culprit is obvious. The Doctor is the only option, and even the setup doesn't hide it very well. So, instead of tension, we get a waiting game. That said, it's absolutely fascinating how the darker version of Doctor moves through normal spaces. There's a quiet stretch where he walks through the ship, calm on the surface, but clearly off inside. And if you think about it, this restraint is actually better than the louder moments. Add in the eerie music, and for a second, this episode actually finds a tone, but it doesn't last for long because the plot falls into routine beats and tropes like malfunction, switched personalities, and more. Plus, his motives are never really clarified or even justified by the episode. There are hints that he wants to quote-unquote protect Kes, but the script never explains from what. Even the ending, where the Voyager beams them up during their fall after he drags her off a cliff, is little more than a visually cool Deus Ex Machina placed in a weak story. It looks good, but that's about it. In the end, Darkling is like an excuse to give the Doctor a different role for an hour. Some scenes are fun, many aren't, but we believe the idea of an evil version of Doctor could have been disturbing, but instead it feels like a missed opportunity with an episode that's great in parts, but not so much as a whole. Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 1, Episode 24, Conspiracy. Captain Picard gets a highly confidential message from Captain Walker Keel of the USS Horatio. Keel refuses to explain anything over comms and insists on a face-to-face. When they finally meet, Keel talks about strange orders coming out of Starfleet Command and hints at suspicious deaths among the officers. He clearly smells a conspiracy, and then, before anything can move forward, the Horatio is destroyed. Picard doesn't brush it off and puts Data on the job, asking him to review 6 months of Starfleet orders. Data finds irregular patterns at the highest levels, so Picard does what you would expect him to and heads straight for Earth. As the Enterprise approaches, 3 Starfleet admirals, namely Savar, Aaron, and Quinn, contact him. They act surprised to see him, but invite Picard and Riker to dinner. Now, this whole dinner sequence is extremely uncomfortable. The admirals talk about a superior life form, but their behavior is very fishy. And then, Dr. Crusher figures it out. You see, Quinn isn't acting strange for no reason. A bug-like parasite has wrapped itself around his brain and is controlling him. At dinner, these parasites want to take over Starfleet by using humanoids as hosts, but Picard and Riker think quick and subdue the infected admirals, forcing the parasites out of them. However, it doesn't end there, because one of them escapes, slips under a door, and that leads them to Quinn's assistant, Remick, who's in the middle of eating it. Yep, that happens, and Remick starts to transmit a signal like a beacon. Picard and Riker open fire, destroying the body and revealing a larger parasite inside him. They keep firing until it's gone, and after that, Crusher confirms that the rest of the parasites died without the one leading them. This episode was most likely inspired by the numerous Parasite movies, where the host becomes all volatile and goes on a killing spree. It's the classic invasion of the body snatchers trope where you can't even trust the people around you, and, unsurprisingly, that kind of sci-fi horror works very well in a Star Trek setting. Sadly though guys, that's all we've got for you this time. If you like this video, please consider hitting the like, subscribe, and share buttons if you want to see more stuff like this. Those clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these awesome videos. But for now, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.